the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government needs new talking points. Mr. Speaker, they are not listening to Saskatchewan people. Cost of living is the #1 issue for people in this province, but the Sask Party is doing nothing to help them.
That's right.
It's time to give people a break at the pumps. Why won't the Premier scrap the fuel tax for 6 months to give Saskatchewan families a break?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are providing relief for people in this province by removing the carbon tax from home heating bills, not only to save the average household about $400 a year, Mr. Speaker, but more importantly to provide fairness to Saskatchewan residents that have not been afforded to them by the Prime Minister of this country, propped up by the NDP in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so that is one of the measures that we are doing. Mr. Speaker, what I can say is that in terms of reducing the fuel tax, Mr. Speaker, what the public knows is every single dollar under this government, unlike under the NDP, when it took more in fuel tax than we spent on highways, every single dollar is spent on the highways budget, Mr. Speaker. We don't want to see an NDP do what they did in the past to axe the budget when it came to highways, Mr. Speaker. Too many people in this province remember that the NDP stands for no darn pavement.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan people deserve so much better than they're getting from this tired and out-of-touch government. When the Sask Party came into office, they promised to be the most transparent and accountable government in Saskatchewan history. But they've broken that promise time and time again. Here's the most recent example. The Ministry of Health publishes a report every year called the Medical Services Branch Statistical Report. This shows how many doctors and specialists are working in Saskatchewan. Usually it's posted online in December, but the Sask Party didn't post it this year, so we FOI'd it. The response? They denied it because the report is apparently going to be published on May 31st. Why is the Sask Party burying this report until after session is over?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this government's record when it comes to health care, and specifically to doctors in this province, Mr. Speaker. More than 1,000 more physicians are now practicing in Saskatchewan since 2007, Mr. Speaker. A 62% increase overall in physicians, 100% increase in pediatricians, 79% increase in specialists, more general practitioners, more psychiatrists, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the past 28 months here in Saskatchewan, 107 family physicians and 155 specialists have been recruited to Saskatchewan for a total of 262 physicians, Mr. Speaker, far outpacing the record of the members opposite during their time in government, where we lost doctors, we lost nurses, we closed hospitals, we closed long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker. That's something that the people of this province never want to go back to, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if that were true, why not release the report today? This is information that people are entitled to, Mr. Speaker. The minister's burying the report, plain and simple. Saskatchewan people deserve to know how many doctors have been lost under this Sask Party's watch. We have a right to that information, and it tells us everything we need to know about the Sask Party government, that they're using these loopholes in FOI law to bury this report until after session is over. Will the minister make this report public today, yes or no?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my previous answer in terms of the number of record investments that we've made into health recruitment and retention in this province, significant investments that, by the way, Mr. Speaker, we're only able to do that, Mr. Speaker, as a result of a strong and growing and vibrant economy in this province, so that we can make these investments, continue to build up our healthcare system, Mr. Speaker. As I talked about, a significant number of new doctors that are working in this province, and will continue to do that. We very much appreciate the work that we have with these the Saskatchewan Medical Association, recently signing a new contract with our family physicians in this province that, as they have said, will go a long ways towards recruiting and retaining doctors, and they're very grateful for the partnership that they have with us as a government, Mr. Speaker. And I would conclude by saying it's also important for people to know the record of the members opposite, which is that the NDP had the worst doctor and nurse recruitment and retention record in this province, lost 450 nurses, Mr. Speaker, lost 176 doctors between 2001 and 2006.
Recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I guess that's a no, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister is pulling out all the stops to keep Saskatchewan people in the dark about the state of our healthcare system. With each passing day, this tired and out-of-touch government becomes more and more allergic to transparency. This is basic information about the state of our healthcare system, and it's not acceptable for the Sask Party to keep it under wraps until after session is over, or maybe until after a spring election, Mr. Speaker. So what changed? How did the Sask Party go from being the most open and accountable government in history to stonewalling basic requests for information?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of transparency, I think the people of the province would like to know what the members opposite would do. What is their plan? What is their platform for health care, Mr. Speaker? Actually, well, we have heard some of their platform. I think in the last election, their platform, they had a plan to hire, I think it was 450 nurses over 4 years. That was the lofty goal that the members opposite set, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since December of 2022, we have been able to hire over 1,000 new nursing graduates from Saskatchewan and from other Canadian provinces, Mr. Speaker. In addition to that, hundreds of more nurses coming from the Philippines who are working either in our facilities right now or they're working through the bridgeway, the pathway to bridging, Mr. Speaker, to be working in our communities. We heard in member statements earlier some of the benefits of these successes, how it's helping to improve health care right across this province, even though the members opposite don't like to hear the facts, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Recognize a member from Regina Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government keeps keeping Saskatchewan people in the dark and failing them. That applies to health care, and that applies to their mismanagement of our public finances. That's right. The third quarter financial report used to be released in February or early March in advance of the budget. But the Sask Party scrapped that a few years ago, a basic accountability measure. When they refused to release it this year, we FOI'd it. Like the medical report, the Sask Party denied our request because it will be published sometime into the future. It's not acceptable, and it's not fair to Saskatchewan people. Why won't the finance minister come clean with Saskatchewan people as to the true state of our finances and release the third quarter financial report?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to take that on behalf of the government. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite will know that this is a practice that it has been in place for a number of years now, Mr. Speaker. It will be released as a part of the budget, Mr. Speaker. We will provide that full transparency in terms of not only the third quarter, but just within a couple of sleeps, Mr. Speaker. That member and all members and the public will see a budget delivered by this finance minister that will be good for this province, that will see investments in education and health and in our communities, everything that the people of this province expect.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Regina Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party used to release the third quarter financial report. That's a fact. Here's from the news release from March 2nd, 2018, quote, deficit lower at third quarter. From the news release from February 29th, 2016, quote, third quarter revenues are down. When the minister says, and the finance minister says, that burying the third quarter financial report is a long-standing practice of that government, that's demonstrably inconsistent with the facts.
That's right.
It's nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Sask Party relying on loopholes in the law to get around providing basic accountability to Saskatchewan people? Why won't they come clean on the true state of our finances?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's simply not the case. We do provide that accountability and transparency for the people of the province, Mr. Speaker.
Next week.
We will be providing that next week when the finance minister delivers a budget, Mr. Speaker, a budget that is going to ensure that we have a strong economy and a bright future for all residents in this province.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, it makes you wonder, what are they hiding over there, Mr. Speaker? Well, let's just look at what was said in this room on Budget Day last year, where the finances have gone from Budget Day last year. At budget time, they said we had $1 billion surplus, Mr. Speaker. Then the mid-year report came out and they said, well, no, they blew it. It was a $250 million deficit, but just wait. Then we see just a couple weeks ago $757 million of additional spending with no accountability and no report. It certainly looks like we've gone from $1 billion surplus to $1 billion deficit, a $2 billion miss on the budget, a swing as a result of the mismanagement of those financial gurus over there, Mr. Speaker. Why won't the Sask Party release the third quarter financial report, or at least why won't they tell us just how big is the deficit this fiscal year?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Town Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd be interested to know from that member opposite what he wouldn't have provided support for. Would he have not provided support for the new contract that we have with our doctors, Mr. Speaker? Would he have not provided support for the relocatable classrooms, Mr. Speaker, such as in my community and other communities across this province? Would he have not provided support for our agricultural producers, Mr. Speaker, that have had a difficult last couple of years, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we have a strong economy, and that is going to continue, Mr. Speaker, and it's going to continue because of the work that's being done by this government and by the people of this province, and most especially by this finance minister.
Recognize the member from New Johnny Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, that government has balanced one budget in the last 9 years, Mr. Speaker. They've tripled the debt, Mr. Speaker, and they've spent untold billions on wasted and mismanaged projects, Mr. Speaker. Just look at IT projects that have gone off the rails, hundreds of millions of dollars that don't even work. Let's look at spending $100 million, Mr. Speaker, and counting on travel nurses. Let's look at spending 10 times more the cost to send Saskatchewan women to a donor in Calgary to receive a mammogram. Mr. Speaker, let's look at the GTH. Let's look at the bypass. Mr. Speaker, let's look at their revenue agency. Mr. Speaker, let's look at their redundant and more costly marshal services. Mr. Speaker, let's look at all the ways this government wastes their hard-earned dollars. Mr. Speaker, they missed their budget by $2 billion, Mr. Speaker. How do Saskatchewan people have any faith in what they say next week?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite's question, and the minister asked him the question as well, which of the things would he cut? Which of those things would he have not done? Would he have not done the agreement for the doctors, the agreement for the Medical Association? And we heard him again, Mr. Speaker, again, the members opposite, running down the healthcare system, running down our healthcare teams. And he says he has a longer list. We're looking forward to that list of all the things they want to cancel, Mr. Speaker. But again, we've heard them talk down the initiative to give women the option to have breast cancer diagnostics done in Calgary as a short-term measure, Mr. Speaker, something that was brought to us by the healthcare professionals here in the city of Regina that said we could really use this as a temporary measure while we continue to do things like invest in a new breast health centre like we announced last week, Mr. Speaker, and hiring of more radiologists, hiring of more staff, Mr. Speaker, building up on those services for people of Saskatchewan right across this province that they deserve, and not something that the NDP would cut.
Hear, hear. Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government has shown through their actions that they'll use every loophole they can to avoid being held to account. And that's exactly why Saskatchewan people have no faith in the so-called funding agreement this minister put out last week. It is a mile-wide loophole in the fine print where all the promises are, quote, subject to appropriation. That's government talk for subject to whatever the Sask Party puts in the budget every year once the election is done and dusted, just like they did in 2016. That's right. Why won't the minister sign a real contract with teachers that actually addresses class size and complexity?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I won't take much time to try and explain the budget process to that member opposite. I think the Minister of Finance could do a much better job of that than myself. But I think the member opposite needs to understand every budget is subject to appropriation, Mr. Speaker. That's what we do. We come in this House, we debate it, we debate the budget bills, we go through estimates. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what the budget process is each and every single year. Mr. Speaker, it's very odd, Mr. Speaker, from that member opposite and the leader opposite, Mr. Speaker, to talk about how they want to support school boards, yet they've come out with a position that's opposite to the 27 school boards have expressed. The 27 school boards in our province, Mr. Speaker, they don't want to see class size and complexity in a provincial-wide agreement, Mr. Speaker. We agree, Mr. Speaker. We have a multi-year funding agreement to set classroom supports funding at a minimum level over the next 4 years, endorsed and signed by all 27 school divisions, Mr. Speaker. That's how we're working with school boards around the province.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that this impasse has gone on for far too long because of this minister's smug and arrogant approach and his inability to bargain in good faith. Class size and complexity are the top issues facing classrooms today, and the minister should get a deal done that addresses these problems that hold Saskatchewan students back. If this tired and out-of-touch government won't negotiate on class size and complexity, will the minister send just those issues to binding arbitration?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, this government, and we've been clear on this right since the beginning, we are not going to sign an agreement that puts one federation's interests above the interests of students and families and teachers across the province, Mr. Speaker. We're also not going to sign an agreement that doesn't recognize the diverse needs in communities all across the province, Mr. Speaker. That is not what we are going to do. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to binding arbitration, Mr. Speaker, how do we go to binding arbitration when the Teachers Federation has only been at the bargaining table for half an hour over the last 5 months, Mr. Speaker? We need to have a substantial discussion about the issues that we've brought forward. We want to have that discussion, Mr. Speaker. We've been inviting the STF leadership back to the bargaining table. It's time for them to stop making excuses and be at the table.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, teachers have made it clear that there has to be a real commitment in writing on class size and complexity, and the minister has made it clear he's not interested in that, even though he should be, if he's working in the best interest of Saskatchewan students. It's hard to see any path forward under this Sask Party status quo. We need to get a deal done that addresses class size and complexity to put this to bed. So here's an idea. Why won't that minister get out of the way and send this issue to arbitration so there can finally be a resolution?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been very clear this week. I've been very clear in previous instances, Mr. Speaker, that, Mr. Speaker, there's no reason to go to binding arbitration. The fact that we've only had half an hour at the bargaining table with the STF leadership over the last 5 months. That's not acceptable, Mr. Speaker. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, leadership owes it to their members to be at the bargaining table working to try and find a deal that's in the best interest of their members as well as students and families across the province, Mr. Speaker. It's time for them to be back at the table so we can work on that deal. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this minister owes the people, the students and the teachers of Saskatchewan an explanation why he's going to get in the way of getting a deal done. Why won't he today commit to sending these issues of class size and composition to arbitration and then get back to the table with teachers on all the other outstanding issues and negotiate a fair deal for Saskatchewan teachers?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've outlined previously, but I'll outline again for that member opposite, Mr. Speaker, all the several items that government has moved on in our revised offer, Mr. Speaker. Yep. Mr. Speaker, a salary deal that it's not 23.4%, Mr. Speaker, over 4 years, but it is a salary offer that has an account for cost of living increases, Mr. Speaker. An offer so that the STF can manage their own dental plan, Mr. Speaker. Offer around wording around violence in the workplace, Mr. Speaker, that we believe is a very important step forward in that regard, Mr. Speaker. That's in addition to, again, Mr. Speaker, to the announcement that we will have the largest ever increase to school operating funding in this province, Mr. Speaker. What we are not going to do as government, Mr. Speaker, is sign an agreement that puts one union's interests over the interests of students and families, and that does not recognize the diverse needs in communities all around the province. Government is not going to do that, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the STF to come back to the table. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Saskatchewan Rivers.
Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party government stands in this Assembly, puffs out their chests, pats themselves on the back for helping Alberta and Manitoba with energy in January. At the same time, ignoring that the coal plant in Estevan that provided this energy is actively being shut down by this government. They have committed to the net zero by 2050 agenda with Justin Trudeau and are destroying the economy in southern Saskatchewan. They are choosing to shut down clean coal in favour of more wind and solar farms, farms that have been proven to be abject failures in Germany, France, the UK, Italy, Japan, Taiwan, California, and even Alberta, to list a few. When will all this Sask Party government be open to the public about their energy plan? When will they come clean about the impact of their net zero agenda?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly am pleased to be able to answer this question. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite would know or should recall that she was a member of this caucus when the Pan-Canadian Climate Plan was announced by the federal government and signed by every single province except for one. And that was this province, Mr. Speaker. So no, we disagree vehemently with the federal government, with their plan when it comes to the clean electricity regulations. We know that we're going to continue to produce electrical generation that is emitting, Mr. Speaker, as well as have non-emitting sources. But in the case of emitting sources, 377 megawatt natural gas power plant will be opening later this summer. As well, we have plans for another 377 megawatt natural gas plant at the Aspen site to be open by 2027, Mr. Speaker. As well, we're going to continue to run our other assets, including Boundary Dam 3, Mr. Speaker, where we have demonstrated the technology that the world continues to come to see in Estevan, Mr. Speaker, and is a solution for those jurisdictions that will continue to burn.
Recognize the member for Saskatchewan Rivers.
Mr. Speaker, moments ago at the SARM convention, where RMs of this province voted overwhelmingly by 95% to recognize that CO2 is not a pollutant and that Saskatchewan will remove itself from any national or international agreements that reference net zero. Will this government find its feet today and stand with the people of this province and admit that CO2 is not a pollutant and scrap their net zero by 2050 agreement with Justin Trudeau?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, I'll say that we have disagreed with the clean electricity regulations that have been put in place by the federal government. We'll continue to oppose those, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated, we have over 700 megawatts of emitting fossil fuel, carbon dioxide emitting power plants that are a part of the generation plan for the next number of years that will take us well beyond the next number of decades, Mr. Speaker. We continue to have our investments in Boundary Dam 3, Mr. Speaker. That will continue to be a part of the fleet that we will use, and we continue to encourage the world to come to Estevan to see what we are doing in this groundbreaking technology. But I would say to the member opposite, nuclear generation is non-emitting. Is she opposed to nuclear generation?
Here. Recognize the member from Saskatchewan Rivers.
Mr. Speaker, I ask again, will this government stand with the people today and recognize that CO2 is not a pollutant and scrap their net zero by 2050 agenda?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, I'll just indicate what I have in the past. Mr. Speaker, we have a plan going forward that is made in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. We are opposing the clean electricity regulations. We think that they are like other plans implemented by the Liberals, supported by the NDP, not good for this province, Mr. Speaker. And so we will continue to build natural gas plants. We'll continue to operate our other generating assets, including those that do produce carbon dioxide, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will have a wide range of assets that we'll be able to use going forward, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that people can heat their homes in the wintertime, Mr. Speaker, so we don't come into a situation like they had in Alberta, where we were happy to help out, Mr. Speaker. But again, I would ask the member opposite, and I'm glad to see that she stuck around in question period long enough to hear my answers this time, Mr. Speaker. Is the member opposite opposed to nuclear power because it does not emit carbon dioxide? Is she opposed to nuclear power?
I recognize a member from Saskatchewan Rivers.
Mr. Speaker, I've been hammering the Sask Party government for months in the legislature about axing their 15 cents a litre tax on fuel. Yet they refuse to listen and they refuse to act. They will not give the hard-working Saskatchewan people the same tax cuts that our neighbours have given their citizens. This is just more wreck and neglect by the Sask Party government. They are killing our competitive advantage while taxing our citizens so they can grow the size of their government, Mr. Speaker. As we keep saying, Saskatchewan doesn't have a money problem, it has a management problem. When will the Sask Party management swallow their pride and finally axe their tax on fuel?
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Heavy Construction Association sent a letter disputing the calls for pausing of provincial fuel tax. They said that the suspension would be a short-term solution that will create long-term problems. Industry members' operations would be forced to shut down and move out of the province. Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader and that leader have not only failed to come up with a single policy of their own, the policies that both of them champion would hurt this province, just like the same old NDP. Mr. Speaker, that party and the NDP would leave this province with less businesses, less jobs, less people, but more potholes.
I would like to caution the Minister of Crown Investments Corporations not to make reference to a member's presence or absence in your last answer. And I would like to ask the member from Regina Alphenstone Centre, you said that tell the truth, Jeremy. I would like you to withdraw and apologize that comment.
I withdraw and apologize.